the car a tad bit too quote-unquote dangerous for those uninitiated drivers out there. It's not the sharpest tool when it comes to driving dynamics, which can be a little bit daunting. You don't really want to mess around with this car, especially in wet driving conditions. The local automotive market have seen lots of new EV models coming in and out of our market in recent years. So much so that we even get one all-electric hot hatch in our market. Of course, we're talking about this. This is MG4 XPower SSIC motor, Malaysia's most potent model to date. And in today's video, I'm going to share you many interesting things about this all-electric hot hatch and why it is really all thrills with no frills. My name is Mukhlis. Welcome back to Caricarz. Alright, from the get-go, you immediately notice that the MG4 is a very sporty and striking car to look at, but unfortunately for the XPower top range spec, it doesn't really differentiate that much compared to other lower spec variants of this car. I mean, the only thing you can differentiate from this top spec to other variants is actually this grey coloured accents around the front lip and the side skirt at the rear, and the car also rides on this two-tone 80-inch alloy wheels with this orange hued brake calipers. These are not actually the calipers, just a cover for the brake caliper itself, and it says XPower here, so at least you know that immediately from this you can know this is the XPower model. But the rest of the car looks almost identical to other lower spec sibling, but I think that's not a bad thing because this car is very nice to begin with. You got this very sporty roofline, lots of sharp edges and shoulder lines, and at the back here you can see it comes with the full width LED taillights with this stunning design. Overall, the car looks pretty nice as it is, but I would say just a little bit of shame that the top spec variant doesn't differ that much compared to its lower spec siblings. The no frills bit is a bit more apparent as we get inside the MG4 XPower here, because let's be honest, it's not the most high-tech or luxurious out of many Chinese EVs out there, but I still say it's not bad because you got almost all the essential bits and pieces inside here. Okay, starting off with the screen, it got this 10.25-inch center infotainment display that supports both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but it is used by cable, so it is not wireless. And on top of that, you also get the 7-inch digital instrument cluster, which is quite nice and colorful, but you got no HUD for obvious reason. Okay, in terms of seatings, it's quite okay because it comes with this semi-bucket seats that covers in this fake leather and Alcantara, which looks pretty okay, but it's got some red stitching because this is supposed to be a performance model, so you need to add some sportiness to it, hence the red stitching and piping. Okay, other amenities you get here including this wireless charging pad, this gear shifters here, you get some USB ports down here. Of course, it still lacks something like there's no ventilated seats, no sunroof, but I have to say those things are quite minor because like I said earlier, you get all the essential stuff, which it makes it pretty okay car to live in, but just don't expect it to be like other Chinese EVs out there. Alright, so life at the back seat of the MG4 XPower is surprisingly quite spacious and quite practical despite the car's small stature from the exterior. Okay, the front seat has been adjusted to my driving position. As you can see, I've got plenty of legroom and surprisingly still a good amount of headroom up here. And you can see the floor is almost flat, meaning that it is ideal car for you to carry 3 adults at the back. And on top of that, you can see it comes with 3 dedicated headrests, meaning that rear passengers are quite comfortable, but not so for the driver because it really block their views, especially if they want to reverse the car. Okay, despite of that, in terms of amenities, it's pretty okay. You only got one USB-A charging port here, no aircon because I mean this is a small car, you can just share the aircon with the front passenger. And you also get this pouch, which is quite neat because you can store your handphones and everything. You got extra storage down here, and in terms of boot space, it's also quite decent because it measures at 363 liters, meaning that it's bigger than the ones we saw in the BYD Dolphin. And you also get lower storage compartment to store your cables and whatnot. So in terms of practicality, despite its sporty and small stature, the MG4 surprisingly is quite a practical EV for you to have. Alright, in terms of battery, the MG4 XPower uses a 64 kWh battery pack, which is the same unit used on the MG4 Lux, but not as big as the 77 kWh unit found on the extended range model. Well, as a result, this moderate sized battery pack grants this dual motor high performance EV up to 385 kilometers of EV range, which is something expected when you get this amount of power. Well, in terms of charging, it's not bad actually because it supports a DC-FC at up to 150 kilowatt, allowing this car to go from 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes, while AC charging is capped at 11 kilowatt. Again, somewhat expected in the EV at this price range. But I think the reason why MG decided to use the smaller battery unit instead of the bigger 77 kilowatt hour unit on the MG4 XPower is because of the weight, because this car already weighs at 1800 kilogram. If it uses the bigger battery, it can go up to 2000 kilogram, which is not ideal for a performance EV hot hatch to have. So in terms of powertrain, of course, the MG4 XPower is the only variant in the lineup to offer a dual motor Orija setup, where of course you sacrifice a bit of the space at the front side because technically there are no front here, but you get tons of benefit in terms of power because the total system output for this car is 420 horsepower and a whopping 600 Nm of torque. 0 to 100 just take about 3.8 seconds, making it one of the fastest EVs to be launched in our market currently, especially in this price segment. But of course, with that amount of power, it actually makes the car a little bit quite dangerous for those who are not so familiar with this amount of power. But nonetheless, it's still good to see that this amount of power in this amount of price. Alright folks, so now we're behind the wheel of the new MG4 XPower, and the first thing you'll notice when you drive this car is how much power it actually stores. And of course, 420 horsepower and 600 Nm of torque is nothing until you slam on the foot pedal and experience all its sheer might and power. And with this amount of power, it's quite ridiculous because of the car's price, and it's very powerful because according to MG, 0 to 100 just take about 3.8 seconds, which is very ridiculous for this size of car or the price especially. But of course, this also makes the car a tad bit too quote-unquote dangerous for those uninitiated drivers out there, because I'm being frank here, this is not the most sure-footed cars I've driven, especially in performance car aspect, because you still feel some noticeable body rolls and lean, especially in the corners. So it's not the sharpest tool when it comes to driving dynamics, which can be a little bit daunting if you match with a very crazy power output, so much so that you don't really want to mess around with this car, especially in wet driving conditions, because you don't really want to sand this car in wet and rainy conditions. But with that being said, yes, the handling is not that best, but it's not really that bad actually, because according to MG, the MG4 XPower got a slightly stiffer suspension tuning compared to other variants. But then again, because of the car's weight, I think is about 1800 kilograms, which is quite heavy for such a small car. You can really feel the weight, especially in the fast corner. But that being said, you can still enjoy this car, but just don't expect it to perform like any other performance hot hatches or performance car. But then again, it's not bad. Okay, other than that, in terms of comfort and everything, of course, with stiffer suspension, comfort is not the best thing. We can really feel all the bumps and cracks on the road on this car, but not as bad as other performance cars I've tested before. Okay, in terms of NVH also, of course, this being an EV, you get no engine sound and everything. It even doesn't have any fake engine noise like many other EVs out there. So it is really quite a pretty quiet driving experience, although it's susceptible to some wind and tire noises once you go beyond the 120 km speed mark. But overall, I have to say, regardless of its slightly subpar driving dynamics, I would say with this amount of power, you're surely gonna have a blast driving this car. Just please be careful about it. Don't drive recklessly, especially on public roads, because not only you can endanger yourself, you're also gonna bring harm to other road users. So just gotta be a little bit careful, but other than that, still a fun car to drive. Right, in terms of driving ergonomics and everything, like I mentioned in my previous presentation, this car is not the most high-tech and doesn't laden with tech amenities and some distraction bits like many other Chinese EVs. But at the same time, it kind of sits in a limbo where it doesn't want to be too much high-tech, but at the same time, it's not as quote-unquote basic as many other ICE-powered cars out there. Like say, for example, you can see the screen. The screen is quite small, which is pretty good because you don't want drivers to get distracted. But at the same time, most of the driver settings, just like many other EVs, are actually hidden inside the menu here. So meaning that to access them, like it or not, you still need to access this screen here instead of having buttons like many other conventional ICE powered cars have. So for example, like if you want to change your driving mode and everything, you still need to access the screen, but of course there are some shortcut buttons you can play around. But I would say that to change it on the fly, it's still quite dangerous and dare I say almost impossible. Same goes to the aircon controls and everything. I mean, you only got like 2-3 buttons for aircons, but no buttons for the speed, temperature and everything, which I think is a bit of a miss, because I get it, they want to appeal to the more traditional car buyer's mindset, which is having some in-session controls with the physical buttons and whatnot, but the lack of it in this car is quite questionable. And okay, with that being said, other than that, in terms of buttons and everything on the steering wheel, it's got plenty of buttons, which is quite nicely laid out. But my problem is that some of the buttons are not be labeled with any symbols or writing, so it's quite confusing at first for you to navigate through the infotainment or the instrument cluster using the buttons here. But once you get used to it, it is pretty okay. All right, with enough talk about that, in terms of safety, of course, this car comes with MG Pilot ADAS suite, which entails lots of ADAS function. And overall, I have to say some of it are okay, although some of it is quite, I would say, finicky. It's too sensitive at times, especially the autonomous emergency braking and the rear cross affair alert. But of course, you can just play around with the intensity and everything. In terms of adaptive cruise control, it's quite okay, although once you set it beyond the 100 km/h speed, the steering assist or the lane keeping assist system can be quite hit or miss, because it cannot really control honor the car that much, so you still need to pay somewhat of a attention when you set the ACC. But other than that, I will say the stop and go function works pretty well. The rear cross-traffic LED and the blind spot monitor is quite nice, and then of course you also got the 360 camera, which is quite useful. In terms of passive equipment, you got seatbelt reminders and everything, which of course somewhat expected in the modern cars nowadays. But of course it's a hit and a miss. But overall, I have to say, like I said earlier, the MG4 XPower feels like it's stuck in the limbo between trying to be on par with some of its high-tech, high-performance EV or Chinese EV SUVs out there, but at the same time it tries to set it so low like your typical traditional ICE car, but not really reaching that far. So it's somewhat a hit of a miss. So either you like it or you hate it. For me, I would say okay lah, you cannot complain much, especially at this price. Alright, so all in all, despite some of its shortcomings, I still think that the MG4 XPower here is still a very viable choice for you who are looking for a high-performance EV, but you don't want to spend a little bit too much of your money. Because at the end of the day, this is a living testament that how much power and torque EVs can offer at a fraction of the price of its ICE-powered counterpart. And at 158,900 ringgit, this is an absolute bargain. Because for that amount of power, if you want to buy something petrol, you need to spend, I would say, at least 300,000 and above. And if you go back about 10 or 20 years ago, this amount of power can only be found in supercars or some European hypercars only. But then again, if you are still not confident with the EV living, meaning that you still have range anxieties or you frequently travel out of state, perhaps you should consider the MG4 Extended, which has a larger battery pack that can go up to more than 500 kilometers in a single charge. But at the same time, it prices about 10,000 ringgit cheaper than this, but it still got decent amount of power. But in case you really want that amount of power in a sporty EV hot hatch form, this is unfortunately the only option currently available in our market, unless, and I said unless, BMW Motors decide to launch the manic Hyundai Ioniq 5N into our market. Alright folks, so that concludes our video today on the all-new MG4 XPower. So what do you guys think about this all-electric performance hot hatch? Would you take this over any other performance EVs out there? As always, don't forget to leave your thoughts, comments below. For more content like this, check out caricarzcom/news. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.